Picture this. You're 63 years old. You've spent 40 years building something with your bare hands, and now your body can't keep up with the work anymore, and there's nobody left to help you carry it. That's the exact moment a stranger walks up your driveway with no horse, no weapon, and a coat held together with wire. Would you let him in? Wyoming, 1881. Ruth Hargrove was standing at her kitchen window when she saw him. A boy, walking slow, walking careful, like someone who'd learned the hard way not to waste a single bit of energy he didn't have to spend. He wasn't riding. He wasn't running. He was just walking, one boot in front of the other, up the long dirt road toward Cedar Hollow Ranch. Ruth had seen a lot of things come up that road over the years. Peddlers. Preachers. Once, a whole traveling circus that got lost trying to find the next town over. But she'd never seen anyone look quite like this. His boots were falling apart, patched together with old leather and bits of wire. His coat was torn at the shoulder and tied shut with a piece of string. No horse. No bag. No gun that she could see. Just a young man who looked like the world had already tried to chew him up and hadn't quite finished the job. Behind her, her husband Tom sat at the table, staring down at the ranch ledger the way he did every single morning now. Not reading it, really. Just staring at it, like if he looked hard enough the numbers might change on their own. They never did. Someone's coming up the road, Ruth said. Tom didn't even glance up. Let them keep walking. But something made her keep watching. And when the boy got to the gate, he stopped. He took his hat off with both hands, slow and respectful, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Then he looked around. At the house. At the barn. At the cattle grazing in the far pasture. He was thinking, really thinking, the way you look at a puzzle before you try to solve it. Then he walked up and knocked on the door. Tom and Ruth had been on this land for 31 years. They built Cedar Hollow from nothing. 2 rooms and a dream, that's all they started with. Over 3 decades they turned it into 400 acres of good grazing land, 30 head of cattle, and a life they were proud of. They'd raised 2 sons on that land. One of them grew up and moved to the city, sends a letter and a little money every Christmas. The other one is buried on the hill behind the barn. A fever took him in the winter of 1874. He was 19 years old. They were tired in a way that goes down to the bone. They'd worked hard their whole lives and they'd lost heart too, and now they were running on pure stubbornness because the actual energy had dried up years ago. The ranch, the thing they loved more than almost anything, was becoming too heavy for 2 aging bodies to carry. And that's the moment this young stranger picked to knock on their door. When Ruth opened it, she got a better look at him. He was younger than she thought. Maybe 19. Maybe younger. Thin in that specific way that means hungry, not built that way naturally. There was a cut along his cheek, a couple days old, never properly cleaned. But his eyes were steady. Not shifty, not calculating. Just calm. Careful. Sorry to bother you, ma'am, he said. Name's Silas. I've been on the road a while. I can see your cattle from here, and I can see your south fence is down in 2 spots, and your water trough by the barn is cracked and probably leaking half of what you put in it. Ruth just looked at him. I know cattle, he said. I know fence work, I know water systems, I know horses. If you'll let me stay, I'll take care of your herd. That's all I'm asking. Meals and a place to sleep. Tom came up behind Ruth at that moment. Tom Hargrove was not a man who trusted easily. He'd had drifters show up before. One stole a saddle. One drank himself sick within a week and had to be sent off. One just vanished overnight with $40 from the kitchen drawer. Tom looked this boy over, top to bottom, the patched coat, the busted boots, the fresh cut on his face, and the word "no" started forming on his lips like it had a dozen times before. And then, right at that exact second, they heard it. A sound carried on the wind from the south pasture. Cattle in trouble. Not the normal grumbling of a hungry herd, but that sharp, panicked sound cattle make when something has spooked them and they're running somewhere they shouldn't. Before Tom or Ruth could even react, Silas was already turning toward the sound. "Your herd's moving," he said, calm as anything, already putting his hat back on. "Fence is down and something pushed them through. You've got maybe 10 minutes before they hit the tree line, and if that happens you won't find them again till morning." He looked straight at Tom. "I need a horse. Now." Tom gave it to him. Just like that. No hesitation, no interview, no thinking it through. He pointed at the horse in the corral and said, "Take him," and Silas was moving before he was even fully in the saddle. Ruth watched from the fence as Silas disappeared over the hill. 22 minutes later, he came back with every single cow, all 31 of them, moving in a calm, tight group in front of him like he'd been herding cattle his entire life. Trailing behind the herd was the ranch dog, an old border collie named Scout, who apparently decided somewhere in those 22 minutes that his loyalty now belonged entirely to this stranger on the horse. Silas brought the cattle into the pasture, shut the gate, and rode back over to Tom and Ruth. He didn't even sound out of breath. "2 spots on the fence are down," he said. "There's another section on the east side that's been pushed from the inside too. Might be a bull getting restless, might be something on the other side of the tree line spooking them. I'd want to walk the whole line in the morning." Tom looked at his cattle. He looked at the boy. He looked at his wife. Ruth didn't say a word. She didn't need to. "There's a room in the back of the barn," Tom said. "It's not much. Straw mattress, 1 blanket. Wash basin by the door." Silas nodded. "That's more than I had last night." "Supper's at 6, Ruth said. "We don't wait on anybody." "Yes, ma'am." That was how Silas Bellamy came to Cedar Hollow Ranch. In the weeks that followed, Silas fixed every inch of that broken fence line, all 400 acres of perimeter, walking it foot by foot with wire and pliers in the cold. He didn't just patch the cracked water trough, he rebuilt the whole thing with stone and mortar so it would survive the winter freeze and thaw without cracking again. He found a weak spot in the barn roof before the first snow could find it, and spent 2 full days up there in the October cold replacing shingles. With the cattle, he was better than good. He had a rare gift, the kind you can't teach, of moving through a herd so calm and so quiet that the animals barely noticed him. He could read their mood the way a sailor reads the ocean. Tom watched him work the herd one morning and didn't say a single word. But Ruth saw the look on her husband's face, and she knew exactly what it meant. This boy was as good with cattle as their own son had been. Maybe better. Every evening, Silas ate supper with them at 6 sharp. Never late, not once. He was quiet at the table, listening more than talking. He asked questions about the land. Where the water ran in spring. Which pastures stayed green in a dry year and which ones burned out fast. Tom answered every question, a little more each night. And Ruth watched all of this happen and kept her thoughts to herself, because there was something about Silas she couldn't quite settle. It wasn't dishonesty. She had a sharp instinct for liars after 61 years on this earth, and this boy had none of that in him. He worked hard whether anyone was watching or not. He never once stepped into the house without being invited. What unsettled her was what he never talked about. Where he came from. He'd only ever said, "Kansas originally, been working ranches since I was 15. 4 years of silence hiding behind that one sentence. Then one night in November, with the first real snow falling and the wind pushing against the windows, Ruth set down her sewing and asked him straight out. Silas. What happened in Kansas? Tom looked up from his book. Silas stared at the fire for a long moment before he answered. My father's ranch, he said finally. I worked it with him since I was old enough to lift a fence post. My mother died when I was 12. It was just the two of us after that. He paused. He passed 2 years ago. Left the ranch to me. And? Ruth said gently. And I was 19 and I didn't know enough. I made bad calls. Borrowed money against the land when the herd got sick, figured I'd pay it back by spring. I couldn't. He looked down at his hands. Bank took it in April of last year. I walked away with $30 and whatever I could carry on my back. The fire crackled in the silence. I've been moving since, he said. Working where I can, trying to. He stopped, started again. I don't even know what I'm trying to do anymore. I just know I can't stop moving yet. Ruth picked her sewing back up. You've been trying to find something worth stopping for, she said. Most people are. There's no shame in it taking a while. But before Silas could find that place, there was a problem waiting on the road, and his name was Garrison Wade. Wade had been trying to get his hands on Cedar Hollow for over a year. He'd approached Tom twice already, and Tom had said no both times, the second time with a rifle in his hands, which pretty much ended that conversation for a while. Now Wade was back, riding up with 2 hired men, all 3 of them wearing their guns low, looking at the house the way men do when they've been paid to make trouble. Tom went for his rifle. Ruth stopped him. Wait, she said. Just wait. She went out to the barn. Silas was already awake, coat on, watching the 3 riders approach with the same slow, careful attention he gave to everything. Scout was pressed against his leg, every muscle tight and ready. You know those men? Silas asked. The one in front's been trying to take this ranch for over a year, Ruth said. Silas was quiet for a second. Is your husband about to do something that makes this worse? He's considering it. Silas walked out to the fence, unhurried, hands loose at his sides. Help you? Silas asked. Wade looked down at him from his saddle, a heavy-set man in a fine coat with soft hands. I'm here to speak with Tom Hargrove. Mr. Hargrove's not available. I manage operations here. You can talk to me. Wade's eyes flicked to the house, then back. And who exactly are you? Silas Bellamy. I've been running this ranch since September. If you've got business with Cedar Hollow, you've got business with me. The 2 hired men shifted uneasily in their saddles. I have an offer for Hargrove, Wade said, his voice smooth and reasonable. A fair one. This land isn't producing what it should. He's an old man. This winter's going to be a hard one. I'm just trying to help him see what's in his own best interest. Mr. Hargrove's best interest, Silas said, is for you to take that offer back to town. Wade's face didn't change. Son, I think you're misunderstanding your position here. I think you're misunderstanding mine. The 2 riders looked at each other. Because here was a 19-year-old kid, alone, unarmed, standing at a fence in the dark, and he wasn't scared. Not pretending to be calm, actually calm. There's 3 of you, Silas said. There's one of me out here at this fence. But there's a man in that house with a rifle who's been waiting a year for a reason to use it. And if anything happens to me tonight, you'll have just handed him one. He looked straight at Wade. Do you want this land badly enough to bleed for it tonight? Nobody said anything. The wind moved down off the mountain. Wade stared at Silas for a long moment, then looked past him toward the house, toward the dark window where Tom's shape stood backlit, rifle in hand. "This isn't finished," Wade said. "I don't expect it is," Silas said. "Come back in daylight. I'll make coffee." Wade turned his horse. All three of them rode off into the dark and didn't stop until the sound of hooves faded completely. That night, Tom did something he hadn't done since 1874. He pulled out the good whiskey. He poured 2 glasses and slid one across the table to Silas without even asking. "You stood your ground," Tom said. "They would have come back worse if I'd shown them any give." "I know." Tom turned his glass slowly in his hands. "I've been trying to show that man no give for a year straight. But a year wears a person down." He looked at the table. "I'm 63 years old with 400 acres and 30 head of cattle, and I can't work this land the way it needs working anymore. I knew that going into this winter. So did Wade. That's exactly where his power comes from. He waits for you to get tired." "He'll come back," Silas said. "He will. So we'll need a plan." Tom looked up. Silas went quiet for a moment. "I lost my father's land," he said. "I was 19, I made bad decisions, and it cost me everything. I've thought about that every single day for 2 years." He looked Tom in the eye. "I don't want to watch someone else lose theirs too." The fire popped in the silence. Over in the corner, Ruth had stopped sewing, though she didn't look up. Tom didn't say anything for a long while. Then, quietly, "My son is dead." "I know," Silas said. "I'm sorry. He would have turned 24 this February." Tom turned his glass in his hand again. He knew this land the way you're learning it now. The water, the pasture, which fields go dry in a bad year. He looked at Silas. "You've been asking him the exact same questions he used to ask me." "I didn't know that." "No. You wouldn't have." Tom finished his whiskey and poured another. "I've got a lawyer in town. Good man. And I've been thinking about something since September, since the day you fixed that water trough without anybody having to ask you." He set the bottle down. "I want to make you an offer. Work this land with me through the winter. Come spring, if it's still working, if you still want to stay, I'll draw up papers. 30% of the operation. Not wages. Ownership. And in 10 years, when I can't work this land anymore, you get first right to buy the rest at a fair price. Not a fire sale." The room went completely silent. "Why?" Silas finally asked. "Because you're good," Tom said. "Because you stood at that fence tonight and you weren't afraid, and you didn't do anything foolish. And because—" He paused, started again. "Because this land deserves someone who's going to love it. And I think you might." Silas looked up, and his eyes were wet, but he didn't look away. "I'll earn it," he said. "I know you will," Tom said. "That's exactly why I'm asking." Ruth stood up, walked to the kitchen, and came back with a third glass, and the good whiskey, because Tom had forgotten to pour one for her, a habit he'd been repeating since the day they got married. "Well," she said, sitting back down. "Now that's settled." And for the first time since he first walked up that road in September, Silas Bellamy smiled. Wade came back in January, this time with a lawyer and a stack of papers and the same patient, confident tone as before. He found Silas at the fence line, Tom at the barn door, and Scout stationed right at the property line with the focused disapproval of a very small dog taking his job extremely seriously. "Cedar Hollow is not for sale," Silas said. "We're registered with the county as a legal partnership. Any future offers should go through our attorney in town. I'll write down his name and address for you." Wade looked at Tom. Tom looked right back at him, rifle resting in the crook of his arm, 31 years of ownership written all over his face. Wade left. He never came back. The rest of that winter was hard, just like Tom said it would be. 3 straight weeks of brutal cold that cracked the water lines and kept the cattle penned up close to the barn. Silas worked through every bit of it without a single complaint, which Tom noticed and never said a word about, because that's just how respect moved between the two of them. By the time March rolled around and the first green grass came up in the south pasture and the creek broke free from the last of the ice, something had settled over Cedar Hollow that hadn't been there since 1874. Ruth still walked up that hill behind the barn some evenings and stood at her son's grave and said things into the mountain air meant only for the two of them. That never fully left. But there were other things now. The sound of 2 men working together in the barn every morning. The sound of Scout running his self-important little perimeter checks. The sound of supper at 6, and conversations that ran longer now. The sound of a house that had finally found its footing again. On the first warm evening of April, Ruth found Silas sitting on the top rail of the south pasture fence, watching the cattle graze in the fading light. She climbed up beside him. They sat quiet for a while. "You wrote to someone," Ruth said. It wasn't really a question. "A girl back home," Silas said. He paused. "We knew each other before. Before all this." He gestured vaguely toward the road. "I don't know. I wrote. We'll see." Ruth looked out at the herd, at the fence line standing straight and solid, at the water trough by the barn, rebuilt so well it would outlast every one of them. "When Tom and I first came here," she said, "we had nothing but each other and a piece of paper saying we owned land we hadn't even built yet. Most days that first year, I thought we'd made the biggest mistake of our lives." She paused. "But you know what we did have? Somewhere to stop. After years of not having that, we finally had somewhere that was ours. Somewhere that needed us." She turned to him. "That changes a person, Silas. Having somewhere to stop." He was quiet for a long moment. Below them, the cattle grazed in the golden light. Scout made his rounds with all the seriousness in the world, and the mountains held their snow against the blue evening sky. "I know," Silas said. And he did. He'd known it, really, since the very first night, since he walked up that road with busted boots and nothing left to lose, and a woman opened the door before he'd even had the chance to knock. You don't always know the exact moment your drifting stops. Sometimes you only figure it out looking backward, months or even years later. But it does end.